The video had already hit 2 million views by the time I found out. My own daughter was the one who showed it to me. Watching her face contort with that specific blend of pity and secondhand embarrassment as she handed me her phone was worse than any board meeting I'd ever faced. There I was on my hands and knees, scrubbing vomit from beneath a desk, while my former VP of marketing, a kid I had personally mentored, filmed me and provided colorful commentary about how the mighty had fallen. Look at him now, folks. From corner office to cleaning shit stains, this is Richard the Iron Fist Harmon. Used to run this place with military precision. Now he can't even get the coffee stains out of my carpet. Tragedy karma is real. Boomer goes bottom. 37 years at Pinnacle Technologies. 17 as its director. And now 8 humiliating weeks as its janitor. I know what you're thinking. Why the hell would a former executive director take a janitorial position at the same company he once ran? The answer is simple. Desperation wears no designer suits. It all started 4 months ago with a deceptively pleasant retirement party. There were speeches, a gold watch that I'd never wear, and congratulatory handshakes from people already measuring my office for new furniture. My successor, Marcus Reed, a 39-year-old MBA with perfect teeth and algorithmic charm, had given the most elaborate speech. Richard represents an era of leadership that built the foundation of Pinnacle, he had said, champagne flute glinting under the fluorescent lights of our conference room. And now we stand on his shoulders to reach higher than ever before. What Marcus really meant was, "Thanks for warming the seat, old man. Now watch me tear down everything you built. I wasn't supposed to be retiring." The board had forced me out, citing fresh direction and evolving market dynamics. Corporate speak for, "You're too old, and we want someone who understands TikTok." The severance package was generous enough to keep me comfortable, assuming. I lived modestly and died promptly, but the market crash that followed hit my retirement fund like a wrecking ball. 4 decades of careful investment planning evaporated in 3 catastrophic weeks. My financial advisor had the decency to deliver the news in person, his voice lowered as if speaking at a funeral. The tech sector correction was unprecedented. "Richard, your portfolio was heavily weighted in the very companies you helped build partnerships with. It's devastating. We're looking at about 18% of what you had before." My wife Carol took it worse than I did. That night I found her sitting in the dark, scrolling through real estate listings for places that were half the size of our current home. "Maybe Arizona," she said without looking up. "The houses are cheaper there. Or we could look into those adult communities where they have nurses on staff." The humiliation of going from giving orders to receiving them was nothing compared to the look on Carol's face when she realized we might have to sell the home where we'd raised our children. 22 days later, I was sitting across from Debbie Saunders in HR, a woman I had once approved promotions for, as she explained the benefits package for Pinnacle's custodial staff. "The health insurance isn't as comprehensive as what you're used to, of course," she said, sliding papers across her desk without meeting my eyes. "But it's something. The wage is $60 to $50 per hour. We've waived the usual probationary period, given your history with the company." I signed where she pointed. "You'll be reporting to facilities management, specifically to Aaron Diaz, I believe. He started as an intern during your last year as director?" Her voice had that carefully neutral tone people use when they're trying not to acknowledge an awkward situation. Aaron had indeed been an intern, a bright kid from state who I'd personally recommended for the permanent position in facilities. Now he was going to be my boss. The cosmic joke wasn't lost on me. "One more thing, Richard," Debbie said as I stood to leave. "I strongly suggest you keep a low profile. Not everyone was fond of your management style. There might be some who see this as an opportunity to settle old scores." I nodded, though I didn't fully comprehend her warning at the time. I'd been a demanding boss, certainly, exacting, perhaps even difficult. But I'd built Pinnacle from a regional player to a national contender. My methods had created value, jobs, opportunity. Surely that counted for something. As it turned out, it counted for absolutely nothing. My first day back at Pinnacle was surreal. I entered through the employee entrance I'd rarely used before, punched a physical time clock for the first time in decades, and changed into the navy blue uniform of the custodial staff in a locker room that smelled of industrial cleaner and body odor. Aaron met me by the supply closet, his face a mask of professional detachment that didn't quite hide his discomfort. "Mr. Harmon, sorry, Richard. I've assigned you to the executive floor for your first week." He handed me a laminated card with a cleaning schedule. I thought it might be familiar territory for you. It was a small mercy that I appreciated, until I realized it was actually a calculated cruelty. The executive floor meant cleaning the offices of people who had once reported to me, people who now had the power dynamic completely reversed. My old office, now occupied by Marcus Reed, was my first assignment each morning. I was to empty his trash, vacuum his carpet, and wipe down surfaces before the executives arrived for the day. On my third day, I found Marcus sitting at his desk, my old desk, at 5:30 a.m. when I knocked and entered with my cleaning cart. "Richard," he exclaimed with exaggerated surprise. "I came in early to prepare for the Baker presentation. Didn't expect to see you quite so soon." I nodded and moved to empty his trash can. "You know," he continued, leaning back in his chair, my old chair, "I kept the same cleaning service you used for your home. The Portuguese woman, Maria? She does excellent work. Much more thorough than the in-house staff here. The message was clear. You're not even good enough to clean my house." "Actually," I replied, keeping my voice steady, "her name is Luisa, she's Brazilian, and she has a master's degree in economics from Sao Paulo University. She cleans houses while getting her U.S. credentials recognized." Marcus just smiled. "Well, good memory for a man your age. Don't forget to do under the desk." By the end of the second week, the novelty of my presence had spread throughout the building. I became aware of eyes following me, of conversations stopping when I entered a room, of phones raised to capture photos or videos when they thought I wasn't looking. The third-floor break room became the site of my first public humiliation. I was cleaning up a coffee spill when Jessica Winters, my former head of sales, who I'd once reprimanded for expense account irregularities, walked in with 3 of her team members. "Well, well," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "if it isn't our former fearless leader. Remember when you made me resubmit my entire quarterly projection because I was off by 0.3%? Said, attention to detail separates the professionals from the pretenders?" She deliberately knocked over her coffee cup, sending dark liquid streaming. Across the counter I'd just wiped clean. "Oops," she said with mock concern. "Attention to detail, Richard. Better clean that up before someone writes you up." Her companion snickered as I silently reached for my cloth. "Actually," she continued, pulling out her phone, "this is kind of a historic moment. The great Richard Harmon cleaning up my mess for once. Mind if I get a quick video for the team chat?" Before I could object, she was filming, providing narration, as if documenting wildlife. Here we see the retired executive in his new natural habitat. Notice the efficient wiping motion, clearly transferable skills from the boardroom to the bathroom. The laughter burned worse than any criticism I'd ever received in my career. That evening, I didn't tell Carol about Jessica's video. I didn't tell her about the whispers, the stares, or the deliberate messes left for me to clean. Instead, I showed her the paycheck from my first 2 weeks and watched as she calculated which bills it would cover. "It's temporary," I assured her, though neither of us believed it. "Just until the market recovers or I find something better." "I know," she said, squeezing my hand. "I'm proud of you, Richard. Not many men would do what you're doing." Her pride was a lifeline I clung to desperately, as the days turned into weeks and the humiliations multiplied. It was Kyle Peters who escalated things to the next level. Kyle had been my executive assistant for 5 years before I promoted him to the communications team. a decision I was now bitterly regretting. He'd always been ambitious, tech-savvy, and, as I was discovering, vindictive. The incident happened in the main lobby. I was mopping near the reception desk during lunch hour when Kyle entered with a group of clients. He spotted me immediately, and a slow, calculated smile spread across his face. "Richard," he called out loudly, causing everyone in the busy lobby to turn. "Perfect timing. Gentlemen, let me introduce you to our former executive director, Richard now ensures our facility is maintained to the high standards he once demanded." The clients looked uncomfortable, but Kyle was just warming up. "Richard, these gentlemen are from Westbrook Financial. Remember when you rejected their partnership proposal 3 years ago? Said they weren't innovative enough for Pinnacle's area trajectory?" I kept mopping, focusing on a particularly stubborn scuff mark. "Richard was known for his strong opinions," Kyle continued, "but the company has moved in more collaborative direction since then. Speaking of which..." He deliberately stepped onto the wet floor I had just mopped, then pretended to slip, creating a commotion. "Whoa! No wet floor sign, Richard? That's a safety violation. Didn't you fire Johnson from accounting for something similar? Safety protocols apply to everyone, remember?" He winked at me before turning to lead the clients. Away as they left, I heard him say, "Can you believe it? From dictating company policy to dictating where the trash goes. There's a metaphor in there somewhere." I finished mopping the floor, my hands shaking with a rage I couldn't express. That night, I discovered just how calculated Kyle's performance had been. My daughter Jennifer called, her voice tense. "Dad, are you sitting down? There's a video going viral on LinkedIn of you at Pinnacle." Kyle had recorded the entire lobby incident, edited it to make it appear I was being confrontational, and posted it with the caption, "The Fall of Corporate Dinosaurs. What happens when you can't evolve? Corporate karma. Raj boomer removal." The comments were vicious. "I worked under this tyrant for 3 years. Seeing him with a mop instead of making people cry in performance reviews is chef's kiss. This is the guy who laid off my entire department by email during Christmas week 2019. Enjoy the minimum wage. Dick. Someone please start a TikTok account tracking this guy's janitorial career. I need this content in my life." I sat in our darkened living room, scrolling through hundreds of comments from people celebrating my downfall, some from individuals I didn't even recognize. Carol found me there at 2 a.m., still staring at my phone. "Come to bed," she said softly. "This isn't healthy." "They hate me," I whispered, "all of them." "Was I really such a monster?" She sat beside me, taking the phone from my hands. "You were tough, demanding, sometimes harsh. But you were also fair in your own way. You promoted people who deserved it. You rewarded hard work, but people remember the pain more than the rewards." "I built that company," I said, my voice breaking. 17 years of my life." "I know," she replied, resting her head on my shoulder. "And now you're saving our retirement by swallowing your pride every day. That takes a different kind of strength, Richard." I tried to believe her, but as the videos continued to surface, me cleaning toilets, me being berated by a junior manager for missing a spot on the window, me eating lunch alone in the janitor's closet because I couldn't face the employee cafeteria, my resolve began to crumble. The worst came 3 weeks later, when Marcus Reed summoned me to his office, my old office, at the end of my shift. "Close the door, Richard," he said, not looking up from his computer. I stood before the desk where I had once made decisions that affected thousands of employees, now waiting like a chastised schoolboy. "There have been complaints," Marcus said finally, looking up with that practiced, concerned expression I recognized from his management training, "about your attitude." "My attitude?" I asked, genuinely confused. I had been nothing but deferential, swallowing my pride hourly. "Several employees have reported feeling uncomfortable with your presence. They say you stare at them judgmentally while performing your duties, that you make comments about how things used to be run better in your day." "That's absolutely false," I protested. "I've barely spoken to anyone." Marcus slid a folder across. The desk. These are written statements from Jessica Winters, Kyle Peters, and 3 others. They feel intimidated by your previous position of authority and your current demeanor. I flipped through the statements, each more fabricated than the last. Jessica claimed I had deliberately cleaned around her desk, but not under it, as punishment for the coffee incident. Kyle alleged I had whispered, "I remember everything," to him in a threatening manner. "This is absurd," I said, closing the folder. "They're hazing me, Marcus. Surely you can see that." Marcus steepled his fingers, a gesture he had copied from me, I realized with distant irritation. "Richard, I'm trying to help you here. The board is aware of the social media situation. Several clients have mentioned it. There's concern about the company image. Being tarnished by having a former director working as a janitor?" I asked bitterly. "Being tarnished by appearing to demean a former director," he corrected smoothly. "The narrative isn't favorable, Richard. And these complaints don't help." "What exactly are you saying?" "I'm saying you have 2 choices. You can transfer to the night cleaning crew at our warehouse facility across town, where there will be minimal employee interaction, or we can discuss separation terms." The warehouse was a 45-minute drive from my home, and night shift would mean never seeing Carol. But separation terms meant no income at all. "I'll take the warehouse," I said quietly. Marcus nodded, clearly expecting this answer. "Effective immediately. Aaron has already prepared your new schedule." He paused. "For what it's worth, Richard, I lobbied for this solution rather than termination. I do respect what you built here." As I turned to leave, he added, "One more thing. Company policy requires you to surrender your phone during shifts at secure facilities like the warehouse, client data protection, and all that." I understood the real message. No more recordings of me could be made, but also I couldn't document whatever awaited me at the warehouse. Marcus was burying the problem, me, where it couldn't generate more negative publicity. The warehouse was worse than I imagined, not because of the work, which was straightforward enough, but because of the isolation. My team consisted of 2 other cleaners, both immigrants who spoke little English, and a security guard who spent his shift watching videos on his phone. For 8 hours each night, I mopped vast empty spaces between shipping containers, cleaned bathrooms used by day shift workers I never saw, and emptied trash cans filled with mysteries I couldn't decipher. No one spoke to me. No one filmed me. No one acknowledged my existence at all. After 3 nights, I realized this was its own form of torture. At least back at the main office, the humiliation had been a kind of recognition. Here, I was truly nothing. On my 4th night, I found something unusual while cleaning the supervisor's office. A file cabinet left unlocked with a folder labeled Executive Compensation Review 2024, partially sticking out. My first instinct was to close it properly. My second instinct, born from 3 decades of corporate instinct, was to look inside. What I found made my blood freeze, then boil. The document detailed a scheme orchestrated by Marcus and approved by the board. They had been systematically devaluing Pinnacle stock through strategic temporary losses and manufactured market challenges, the very factors that had devastated my retirement portfolio. The plan was to buy back shares at depressed prices before announcing a merger with European tech giant Verderon, which would quadruple the stock value overnight. My forced retirement had been timed perfectly with this plan. They had pushed me out just before deliberately tanking the company's value, knowing my holdings would be decimated. Meanwhile, Marcus and the board had been granted new stock options at the artificially lowered prices. I photographed every page with trembling hands, my mind racing. This wasn't just unfair, it was illegal. Securities fraud, market manipulation, insider trading. For the first time in weeks, I felt something. Other than humiliation, righteous anger. But what could I do? Going to the SEC would trigger an investigation that might take years. Confronting Marcus directly would only get me fired, and possibly worse. The board was clearly complicit, And my own reputation was in tatters thanks to the viral videos, painting me as a bitter, fallen executive. That's when I remembered two things. First, Kyle's social media savvy had nearly destroyed me. Second, before I was director of Pinnacle, I had been its chief security officer. I still had one card to play, and it was time to use it. The next day, instead of sleeping after my night shift, I drove to visit an old colleague, Raymond Chen, who had retired 5 years earlier as Pinnacle's IT director. Raymond had left on good terms, with genuine celebration rather than the forced exit I'd experienced. "Richard Harmon," he said, opening his door with genuine surprise. "I saw the videos. Terrible way to treat you after everything you built." Inside his modest home, over strong coffee, I explained what I had discovered. "So they tanked the stock deliberately," Raymond mused, examining the photos I'd taken. "Classic pump and dump, but in reverse. Dump, then pump, and they made sure. You were gone first, knowing your portfolio would collapse." "Exactly," I confirmed. "But going through official channels will take too long. By the time any investigation concludes, they'll have completed the merger and walked away with millions. I need something immediate." Raymond studied me carefully. "What exactly are you asking, Richard?" "I need access, just for a few hours, to Pinnacle's internal servers." He laughed, then realized I was serious. "That's risky for both of us." "I'm already at rock bottom, Ray. What else can they take from me?" he sighed. "Your freedom, if you're caught hacking corporate servers. That's prison time." "Not hacking," I corrected. "Using existing access that may have been overlooked during my transition out of the company." This wasn't entirely a lie. As former chief security officer, I had created a backdoor administrator account years ago, standard practice for emergency recovery scenarios. When I became director, I had maintained the account but kept it isolated from regular system audits. It was an old security professional's habit that I had never quite abandoned. Raymond considered this for a long moment. "If, and this is a huge if, such access still existed, what would you do with it?" "Justice," I said simply. "Not revenge, justice." After another hour of discussion, Raymond agreed to help, not by actively participating, but by looking the other way, while I used his home network and some specialized equipment he happened to have in storage. That night, instead of reporting to the warehouse, I called in sick. Then I sat in Raymond's home office, connecting to Pinnacle's servers through a series of proxies. To my amazement, my old emergency credentials still worked. The IT department had grown sloppy without Raymond's oversight. I moved cautiously through the digital architecture of the company I had once physically ruled, careful not to trip any alarms. My target was specific: the executive communication server. This separate system housed all emails, messages, and documents shared among the C-suite and board members, including Marcus and his co-conspirators. For 4 hours, I methodically downloaded evidence, emails discussing the temporary value suppression, board meeting minutes detailing the planned merger with Verteron, and most damning of all, a spreadsheet tracking the personal stock positions of each executive and how they would benefit from the artificially lowered purchase prices, followed by the merger announcement. But I didn't stop there. I also downloaded something else: every email, text message, and Slack conversation where Kyle, Jessica, and the others had discussed their campaign against me. The coordinated videos, the fabricated complaints, the deliberate humiliations. As dawn approached, I had everything I needed, and a plan forming that would require one more person's help. My daughter Jennifer had always been the most like me: strategic, slightly ruthless when necessary, and fiercely protective of family. When I called and asked her to meet urgently, she came without questions. At a coffee shop far from both our homes, I laid out what I had discovered and the evidence I had acquired. "This is huge, Dad," she whispered, scrolling through the files. On the encrypted drive I'd given her, "This isn't just workplace bullying. This is securities fraud on a massive scale." "I know," I said, "and I need your help to expose it in a way that can't be buried or ignored." Jennifer worked in media relations for a competing tech firm. She understood both the technology and the narrative power needed. "What's your plan?" she asked, eyes narrowing, in a way that reminded me of myself before executing a complex corporate strategy. "A controlled explosion," I replied, "timed for maximum impact and minimum deniability." Over the next 3 days, Jennifer and I prepared meticulously. She created anonymous but credible social media accounts across multiple platforms. I compiled the evidence into clear, irrefutable packages, one for the SEC, one for the major financial news outlets, and one for social media distribution. But the masterstroke was Jennifer's idea. "These people destroyed your reputation using social media," she said during our final planning session. "The poetic justice would be using the same tools against them, but we need it to be undeniable and visceral, something that can't be brushed aside as a disgruntled ex-employee. What are you suggesting?" Her smile was cold and familiar. "Live streaming from inside," which is how I found myself 3 nights later returning to Pinnacle's main office building instead of the warehouse. Using my still valid custodial access card, I entered during the quietest hour, 3 a.m., dressed in my janitor's uniform. In my pocket was a smartphone with a direct connection to the anonymous accounts Jennifer had created. On my cap was a tiny camera she had procured. And in my cleaning cart, hidden beneath supplies, was a laptop connected to Pinnacle's wireless network. As I moved through the darkened executive floor, I narrated softly, "My name is Richard Harmon. For 17 years, I served as director of Pinnacle Technologies. 2 months ago, I became its janitor after my retirement savings were decimated by what I thought was bad luck. Tonight, I'm going to show you it wasn't luck at all." I made my way to Marcus's office, my old office, and used my master custodial key to enter. Once inside, I connected my laptop and began projecting files onto the large presentation. Screen on the wall. The camera on my cap captured everything, the emails, the spreadsheets, the meeting minutes, all clearly showing the deliberate stock manipulation scheme. What you're seeing is evidence of securities fraud orchestrated by current Pinnacle leadership to enrich themselves at the expense of shareholders and former executives like myself. The artificially depressed stock value was no accident. It was planned to coincide with my forced retirement, maximizing my financial damage while setting up current leadership for windfall profits. Next, I pulled up the communications between Kyle, Jessica, and others, their gleeful planning of ways to humiliate me, the coordination of filming opportunities, their fabricated complaints to HR. And this is how they treated a man who gave 37 years to building this company, not because I was a criminal, not because I had harmed the company, but because I represented an old guard they wanted erased, and because bullying is easier when it's disguised as justice. The live stream's viewer count was climbing rapidly. Jennifer's careful preceding of the event through anonymous tips to financial bloggers and reporters was working. By the time I heard the first security guard's radio crackle in the hallway, over 10,000 people were watching. I didn't resist when security entered. I didn't flee when they called the police. I simply continued my calm narration, ensuring the camera captured everything, including the arrival of a panicked Marcus Reed, still in pajama pants, beneath his hastily donned coat. "Richard, what the hell are you doing?" he demanded, his composure shattered. I smiled at him, feeling truly powerful for the first time in months. "Cleaning, Marcus. I'm cleaning Pinnacle very thoroughly tonight." The aftermath was everything I had hoped for and more. The SEC launched an immediate investigation based on both my evidence and the subsequent whistleblowers who came forward. Pinnacle's stock was temporarily suspended from trading. Marcus and 3 board members were placed on administrative leave pending criminal charges. As for Kyle, Jessica, and the others who had participated in my public humiliation, their careers imploded as their private messages went viral, showing calculated cruelty rather than spontaneous reactions. No company wants employees who publicly bully a 62-year-old janitor regardless of his former position. I was briefly detained for trespassing and unauthorized computer access, but Jennifer had arranged for a media-savvy attorney who quickly transformed me from potential defendant to cooperating witness against the larger securities fraud case. Carol got her wish about moving, but not to a smaller home or retirement community. The whistleblower award from the SEC, combined with the class action settlement that followed, restored our finances beyond what we had lost. We relocated to a lakeside home where she had always dreamed of living. I never worked as a janitor again, though I developed a deep respect for those who do. That difficult work, honest work, had saved me in more ways than one. It had kept us afloat financially during the darkest time, but it had also positioned me where I needed to be to discover the truth. These days, I sometimes give talks at business schools about corporate ethics and the changing dynamics of workplace culture. I always start with the same line: I've been the most powerful person in the room, and I've been the least powerful person in the room. Both taught me valuable lessons, but only one made me truly understand the nature of power itself. The video of my nighttime office revelation has over 50 million views now. Sometimes people recognize me in public, not as the humiliated janitor from Kyle's viral videos, but as that corporate whistleblower guy. The narrative has shifted. I still receive occasional messages from former Pinnacle employees. Some apologize for not standing up for me. Others share their own stories of workplace bullying or corporate malfeasance. I answer them all. Last week, I received an unusual email from Aaron Diaz, my former janitor supervisor. He started his own commercial cleaning company and wanted advice on structuring employee benefits. We met for coffee, and he admitted something surprising. "I always felt terrible about your situation," he said. "But I was too scared for my own job to do anything. Watching you clean floors with the same determination you once ran board meetings. It changed how I see work. All work has dignity, if done with purpose." I nodded, understanding completely. "By the way," he added as we parted, "you weren't a half-bad janitor. Your attention to detail was impressive." I laughed for the first time in months. Old habits, Aaron. Some skills transfer across all levels of the corporate ladder, even all the way to the bottom. As I walked away, I realized I no longer felt shame about that period of my life. The company had tried to dispose of me, tossing me into what they considered the waste bin of their corporate structure. Instead, I had transformed into something they never expected: their own personal disposal department, removing the rot they thought no one would ever discover. Sometimes the most dangerous person in a company isn't the one behind the biggest desk. Sometimes it's the invisible person with the master key, moving silently through the dark, seeing everything, the one everyone thinks is just there to clean up other people's messes.